first question I have. First, that's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. Great job. I know it's just not you. So how many people on your team when you do something like this?
On the effects team, there was about 40 of us. Yeah, a little over 40.
How do you manage all 40 people? You said you had a co-head who does this with you, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you, the two of you, delegate all this out to them? Do they get a certain scene and they have to focus on that
So
scene?
what we often do, so it was the two of us as co-heads. We had Erin Ramos, who was was a supervisor, and she was kind of in charge of the water, kind of overall. So she mainly did a lot of the water for the Dark Sea. And we had other people who were leads over Elsa's magic, over some of the ice visions of fire and destruction. So we kind of had our leads kind of like come up with like tools that other people could use. They weren't like supervising other people, but they were like to be point people for not only folks in our department, but folks outside of the department that had questions about our scenes. So what we often like to do is give somebody the entire shot effects wise, and some of these effects scenes have like multiple effects in them. Sometimes we have to split them out between people, but it's nice to be able to have someone go like, that's my shot, like I did, so that, she or he could have to go to maybe a couple of the different leads, the destruction lead and fire lead, to kind of figure out how to get like all the tools that they need to get a shot done. So we try to have people do, we had there's a few people do a lot of the same shots in the same area, so they become kind of a little bit of a team. So that's one way we kind of go about trying to, give a division of labor to give some continuity and cohesiveness to like a particular sequence.
Do you get to, as the head, kind of pick what scenes you do, or are you more as a manager, managing and kind of?
I pick the scenes that kind of I do more like a designer. So I honestly didn't do any shots in this film. My buddy Dale actually did a bunch of the tree interaction and things like that. This is managing our crew and being there at other people's desks and working with all the other department heads. It's kind of hard to actually sit at your desk for hours a day. Which may or may not leap out to you when you watch this film, is that like every tree has like moving leaves, like either low, medium, or high, depending on. And so Dale did a lot of those landed on display because you can just knock a lot of them out.
How did this movie differ from making the first Frozen? And obviously you said it's darker because we start to see more of the myth side of things, but besides that, 'cause I'd like to come back to that, how else did it differ?
It's a bigger scope, and so there was a lot of things we did we like knew how to do really well, like snow in the first Frozen that we didn't have any to do here. No. And honestly, there were areas of the first Frozen that didn't have like any effects in it at all, and so we had these kind of like lulls for us. This movie has like a big effects sequence like almost every couple of minutes, and then they were all different too. Like I almost say we did the same thing over and over again, but we actually had a few things that we knew that were happening that consistently in the first Frozen. And this film kind of went off in a whole bunch of different directions, so it was bigger in scope and much more varied.
Well, you see that in the scene that you showed with Elsa battling basically the water at first, and then she falls in, you see the horse. That, I know when the trailer first came out and they showed that little portion of it, I thought I was actually watching a live scene rather than her, and then when they showed her, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, some people really responded that way.
Yeah, and you could see how much detail you guys put into that and how much action. How long does it take to do a scene like that?
It's funny, that one took a while to do because there was I wish I had actually put it in the presentation. There was a very beautiful VizDef painting that like Deborah Wormsley did. And it was actually based on a photograph of that trip to Iceland, the Chris Buck standing on the beach looking at these big giant waves. And so it was a very specific design ask of even how the surface of the water kind of moved back across the shore. So it took really, really weeks of work, not just of Aaron doing wave simulations to kind of get that right, that cadence right, but also we needed to work with environments, because the way a wave comes to shore and breaks is really based on how steep the shoreline is and how deep the water is. So if we weren't getting the waves that we wanted, based on like how gradual the slope was, so they redesigned that beach to get it to have a steeper drop off for Aaron to be able to simulate the waves that we really wanted to have, and also even made the beach a little steeper so the water would come back down at the speed that we kind of needed it to, because in one of those simulations I showed you was kind of going up on shore and staying there. It was because the shoreline was so relatively flat, which made another problem for Elsa's point of view shot when she's looking at those waves. Now she's a little higher than they are, because we wanted those waves to be able to behave a certain way. And suddenly the 20-foot waves that look great in that long shot didn't look so menacing, because she's actually higher than them. And so Chris was like, well, those waves don't look so scary, and we couldn't cheat the camera because it's Elsa's point of view. And so we had to make like 40-foot waves for that one shot. We had to take close to the wave that destroys her whole ice bridge several scenes later, that deeper ocean wave, and kind of bring that closer to shore and do another simulation that actually looks menacing enough for Elsa not to want to go. Well, she does go in there, but to make it look impressive.
It did look impressive, very impressive. The dark tone. This movie, obviously, I feel, since it is drifting into that myth theme, how did that change how you guys did the effects of this film compared to Frozen?
So, it is a darker story, but it also, has Anna in it too. It's her story, and Olaf, and but we wanted to support Elsa, who she is as a kind of fully formed woman in this film, because in the first one, her magic is, sometimes involuntary, and sometimes she makes things accidentally, and she doesn't do anything accidentally. She's very masterful in this film, and she can create things that are huge really quickly. There's things that there are actually new aspects of her powers. So we really wanted to, really lean into her being kind of fully formed, and not completely unapologetically Elsa. So we had things happen really fast and be really big and powerful, and then there's new effects that are created with her magic that she didn't know she could do.
How does the music come into play? Because you showed the one scene for her song Into the Unknown, and everything effect-wise matched the music.
Oh, yes.
So how does that process
So
work?
just like a character animator, that song had to be written, and we actually had to have the real score, because there's drum beats and horn flurries and things in there that we were animating to. So we worked really closely with the character animator, with the production designer Mike Giamo and Lisa Keene. They both worked very, very closely, and we had a lot of effects pieces and trees pieces that Brian Scott, who animated the scene where the reindeer go by, also one of the longest scenes in there. He kind of placed a lot of trees himself, because that's kind of a fanciful world, and we had to both tease Elsa and the audience. We didn't want to show everything what this enchanted forest really looks like, but we wanted to make something to look pretty that made her want to keep going forward into this, into the unknown. So that was a huge cross-department collaboration with production design, character animation, lighting, and effects, because those trees were actually emissive, so they're actually lighting her as well. So they're brighter, closer to her. They're a lot darker. The further they go away, they kind of drift and come apart, and they aren't necessarily needed anymore. So yeah, it was a real kind of collaboration to be able to actually get all those pieces kind of working together.
So how does that work when they bring you a scene like that? Is it already laid out for you guys and you have to put the effects together? Do you guys get a say in, well, I think this would be a really cool effect to add in?
It's a back and forth, that scene kind of went back and forth through layout, and they don't typically like doing that. They like setting the camera and actually posing things, but because there are things appearing and reappearing, there was definitely some back and forth.
Is there one thing that you wanted in there that you didn't get, or that you had to really fight for that they ended up keeping?
In that sequence, no. Everything kind of worked pretty well in that one. I was very, very happy with how we were able to kind of tease things and see those giants, but kind of not completely see them. Alex Lavoni was our lead for Elsa Magic, and he did that sequence, and I think he really kind of nailed it. I was very, very happy with how that came out. And then we even have some hand-drawn effects in there too, so like the fire that she's watching like go around her. So like I said, there were some things that once we actually started putting effects in, it kind of went back to layout, because like when she was watching the flames kind of go around her, that became a much more kind of playful moment than it was initially laid out.
Now, speaking of hand-drawn, that's where you started with the hand-drawn effects. Obviously, there's a training with The Lion King, and you've kind of seen the progression of Disney as the years have gone on, from their hand-drawn, a little bit into CGI, and then they went back to hand-drawn with Princess and the Frog, which you had a hand in, and now they're back to mainly CGI. How has that transition been for you, and which one do you prefer?
I like making the films we make now. I liked doing hand-drawn, but hand-drawn animation was very much the same technically as it was on Pinocchio, as it was on Lion King. And that's not a knock on it, but it was, there's great animators, and so I wasn't going to get any better at doing hand-drawn fire than I was. I was pretty good at it, and so when CG came along, it was far enough in my career where I was established, but I wasn't, I guess, too old to pick up something and do something new. And for me, as a CG, as an effects animator, even in hand-drawn, our drawings aren't really seen the way a character animator is drawn. The way Glenn Keane or Milt Kahl's drawings are up on screen. Like my drawings were always blurred because they were dust or transparent or blown out because they're fire. And so I wasn't so tied to my art, like that's my drawing. I was just trying to get beautiful images up on screen, so I don't care whether I'm drawing a splash or actually asking particles to behave like a splash. It doesn't really personally matter to me.
Do you think the tone of Frozen and Frozen 2 would be completely different if it was all hand-drawn animation rather than the CGI?
I don't know. I think there's certain acting styles that you should ask a character animator that are a little more subtle, in CG, kind of micro expressions that people have when somebody asks them a question that they don't really want to answer, and they, like we all do. I don't know that people draw that sort of thing, but it makes its way into like a CG performance quite a bit. Some of the effects that we've done in this film, I know I couldn't have drawn, so. And then there's a level what we call in those days like pencil mileage. So that was how much drawing it took to actually time when drawing it took to actually get each individual drawing down. So like the kind of costumes that Elsa wears or Anna wears, no one would draw anything a quarter of that much detail in it. So it would have been a different film. probably a really good film, but a different film.
What are you most satisfied with about this film and all of the effects in it?
You know, I'm most satisfied with how many things in it that are experienced as an effect that are actually our characters, like Gail.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think most people will look at that and think it's completely an effect.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to give a rig to character animation to be able to actually decide where Gail
Mm-hmm.
was, and you know, and give a believable performance to this character that doesn't have like a body or face or anything, but has to be like wrathful, it has to be playful, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm super satisfied that we were able to collaborate across like 3 or 4 different departments to actually make a character like that, or so many of the elements in the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, the research here, you showed us a little bit of that and how some of your team got to go to all of those places.
Mm-hmm.
When they bring that stuff back, is it mainly in film version for you guys?
They bring video, they bring photos, they bring all, you know, a lot of stuff people can.
Preference?
Of what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
I'd rather go and take my own photos
Well,
if I have a preference, but whatever, it depends on what that thing is.
Yeah.
I personally try not to like mimic other films when we're trying to do an effect. So, you know, some real reference from a place to me is better than like somebody else's movie with something in it. So if I'm trying to create a shoreline, like we went to the beach, like where there's some really steep waves that break really close to shore, and we can, you know, did some measurements and things like that, and shot our own kind of reference. So that's all stuff is pretty helpful.
I guess my last question for you is,
Uh-oh.
what do you have down the pipeline? What's next?
Can't really say the untitled 2021 film.
But have you already started?
I'm already on it. I'm
wow.
already on it. Yes.
And already hard work. So, what?
Not so hard that I can't be sitting here kicking it with you.
There you go.
But, you know.
Well, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have up next and seeing this one. I
Yeah.
love the first one, so I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Cool.